Okay, well, welcome. I'm so excited about this class, curriculum, because we have been working on this here at Living Wisdom School Portland for, ever since we started, right? You're always looking for, now, how do I teach this? What do I teach? How will this be different than the teaching I did before I came here? Through the years, we've had a lot of people visit the school wanting to start their own school. And the first thing they always ask is, can we buy your curriculum? Or can we see your curriculum? And we have to go, for a long time I had the stock answer, well, it's about consciousness, not curriculum. It's true, but that was also a little bit of a cop-out because, there are definite things that we do. And if you go to the different Living Wisdom schools, you'll find we have these things in common with other schools. Yet, every classroom is original, and every teacher comes up with their own original ideas. And we have a lot in common with curricula in all schools, of course, because all kids need to learn to read and write and compute and cooperate and follow directions and all those traditional things. So those of you who've taken, and I think as everybody in here has, except for Craig, has taken the Education for Life teacher training to this point, and so you already know about specific gravity, and you may have forgotten that term, but energy levels of the kids, and how that influences what you're doing in the classroom. And you already know about tools of maturity, the 4 tools, which are, anybody? Somebody besides a Living Wisdom Portland teacher. Supriya, do you know the 4 tools?
Intellect.
Yes.
Feeling.
Yes.
Body and will.
Good, body and will. And how those are a really, really important aspect of what we do and enter into the curriculum. But as time has gone on and people keep asking us, what is the curriculum? And homeschool parents ask, and I think, well, how are you going to teach cooperation when if you're homeschooling one child at home? That's going to be a little hard. And then what's the spiritual curriculum? Quote, spiritual curriculum, because when people would say, what's the curriculum? And I say, well, we teach reading and writing and math and all those things, and if you go into the classroom, at some points it might look like a public school classroom because they might be studying American history or they might be studying ocean life, and that might be studied in any school, right? But if you stay around, you'll find there are differences because we're always conscious of teaching with all 4 tools of maturity, but you have to look subtly beneath the surface to find that. But yes, there is something else. People would say, well, what do you teach the kids about God? And especially parents who maybe don't have any religion whatsoever, or parents who have had bad experiences, perhaps in the church they grew up in, where religion and God were more like punitive. You better do this or else. And so they have a bad feeling about that, and they have spiritual aspirations, really. They're attracted to the school because we talk about calmness and compassion and cooperation, and they know that's what they want for their children. Well, what's the God piece have to do with it? So as a staff, we started talking about these things. What do we teach? Other than, we do teach that love and universal consciousness and intelligence are synonymous with God. But what is it? We find that so much of what we teach, we simply teach through who we are, don't we? And I'll come back to this at the end today, but of course the most important element of the curriculum is the teacher. Because the kids, as you know, if you've studied Education for Life or if you've read my book, Calm and Compassionate Children, the kids absorb, really, each other's energy and the energy of the teacher. And they, no matter what you see, they look at what you do, right? No matter what you say, they look at what you do. And it seems like the kids every year get more and more sensitive. Maybe that's my imagination, but they also feel what you are projecting. Even if you don't say it in words, they feel it. I was sharing with somebody earlier today that one of the kids who is a favorite of mine, of course we aren't supposed to have favorites, right? And we don't ultimately, in that I think each one of us loves each child and the soul and the spark that within each child. But definitely we have personalities and our own tools of maturity that sort of are more in sync with some kids than others, right? That there might be a child in your class that you choose to spend time with outside of school for your own pleasure. Now maybe a different one you choose because you know they need you. But for your own pleasure, do any of you have favorites, or is that just me? Do you? Okay. So this child is one of my very, very favorites. And he told his mom that he didn't think I liked him. And I was stunned and a little hurt, not hurt, but a little like sad, because I thought, how could he think that? And I started tuning in more to how I was with him, and I realized because he was one of my favorites and I see him a lot outside school and talk to him a lot outside school, in school I make a concerted effort to be very neutral with him so the other children don't feel he's a favorite of mine. Well, what does he feel from that? He felt this determination I had to be neutral and thought, well, I must not like him. So that really taught me a lot, taught me how to relax a little bit. But just to say, I know you've all experienced this, haven't you, where you find yourself saying one thing, but the feeling you're saying it with is maybe a different thing. It happens to all of us, you know, when some child keeps interrupting and you're asking them to please be patient, but do you say it patiently? Has that ever happened? Yeah. And when it happens, we just need to learn to take a deep breath, and if it's appropriate, say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm feeling impatient now. And that's a great thing to model for the children. But that would be part of the curriculum, wouldn't it? Because what do the children learn from that? They learn a spiritual quality, which is introspection and the ability to admit a mistake and change. And what a wonderful, wonderful thing to teach them. As one educator said, teaching kids to count is fine, but teaching them what counts is best. I love that quote. And that's what it is that we put very first in an Education for Life classroom, is what counts. And what counts, I don't know, what do you feel is something that's most important, that really counts, that you want children to get when they come into your classroom? Volunteer? Yes.
Safety.
You want them to feel safe, both physically and emotionally.
Fun and joy.
You want them to find out that life and learning can be fun and enjoyable.
Curiosity.
You want to, of course, encourage curiosity.
Community.
A sense of community, and that everyone, you know, and didn't Erica demonstrate this morning when I made the effort to make all of you into community by getting you to get to know each other? Left out Bob. So she saved me. Actually, I know from experience Bob's going to be running around tuning things in, and but that's not a good excuse.
To be able to feel strong in their own strengths, what they're good at.
To find out what your own strengths are and be able to build on them and know that everybody has them and they all look different in each other. And that's one thing that I feel like many, many schools don't succeed in. It's more like the kids who are successful academically and athletically, maybe even musically. And it's getting, you know, now with the charter schools where we have the arts and this and that and the other, there are more places for kids to excel in different areas. But there's still some areas like the feeling area that you just don't see a whole lot of recognition of the child who's the most compassionate and the kindest. And sometimes that might be a child who academically is not even above average, but maybe the average as far as their academic work, and yet they always know what everybody's feeling. They always know, you know, there's one child in the class that you can ask, was so-and-so absent yesterday? And they'll know. Some of the other kids might not have even noticed because they excel in that sense of community, that feeling connection with everybody. So all these things enter into what is the curriculum. Today we're going to be especially focusing on these two areas of the Education for Life curriculum, personal development and cooperation. So that all of you who've read Education for Life, you know in the chapter on curriculum, that the curriculum is divided into 6 areas, and the reason for that isn't because it's that. There are parts that are very different, But some of it is just exactly what might be taught in any school, right? And Education for Life can be universal. We have students in the teacher training, not this year, but last year we had a good many in India, and we have one this year who's going to teach in India next year. We have students in Europe. We have students in Canada. That's not such a different culture. But in every place, some of what they teach is going to look like what's taught in other schools there, because culturally, that's what's appropriate for them to learn. In Slovenia, they're not going to need to learn Oregon history, are they? Maybe they don't even need to learn that in Oregon, but certainly it'd be relevant and a great thing to learn if you're going to go on field trips, and a great way to learn that every place has a history that influences today, and the geography and the landscape influence today. But some of the things will be different from culture to culture. What doesn't change is specific gravity, levels of energy, tools of maturity don't change. That's universal. And these new names are more to just get us thinking differently and thinking originally and thinking about what is the core of the subject that I want my children to get. So for example, sciences, instead of calling it sciences, doesn't our Earth, our universe? Okay, first of all, you're in it. It says our, so each one of us is part of it. So it's not something out there that we're learning about. We're related to it. It has to do with us. We're part of it. So do you see, just changing the name slightly can change our slant on it. But these would be what we consider the sciences. Personal development, how to be a friend, how to work in a group. Well, actually, those are cooperation. Personal development. Help me, Lorna. You wrote this down for us.
Using your willpower and self-control.
Using your own willpower and self-control. Starts out in kindergarten, trying to hold, or preschool, trying to hold that pencil and make a letter. In that way, it also, and not interrupting when the rest of the class. I'm sure that Helen can give us lots of examples of how they're learning willpower and self-control as part of personal development. In the book, Education for Life, some of the very most elementary subjects for the kids, the ages that many of us are working with, aren't even mentioned that come here, like learning things like to skip and jump rope, right? It can be physical, spiritual, or mental personal development. Can be any of those. So it includes a wide range of things. And it includes part of what we might call the spiritual curriculum, that is, getting to know yourself, understanding what you're feeling inside. And it also, truth is universally rooted, so other people have said, let me think where this would be that I can read it to you, my book, here we go. For example, any of you know who Howard Gardner is? Famous educator who came up with the 7 intelligences, 6 or 7, and then there's a new one, naturalist. Anyway, he says, interpersonal intelligence refers to having an understanding of yourself, of knowing who you are, what you can do, what you want to do, how you react to things, which things to avoid, and which things to gravitate toward. Wow, if your child learned all that in school, wouldn't you think that that was huge? We are drawn to people who have a good understanding of themselves because those people tend not to screw up. They tend to know what they can do. They tend to know what they can't do. And they tend to know where to go if they need help. And that's one of the strengths I see in our graduates, like Erica and many of her cohorts. And one of the great things about Facebook is you can keep up with all these people from your past and see what they're doing and how psychologically healthy they all seem to me. And I think that's true. I think it's getting more and more true as each succeeding generation in general. But I do think we have had graduates that said, for example, Kashi McGilloway from Seattle said when his family in, where's his family? What's the country where they speak Dutch? Holland. Netherlands. Said to him, well, what was it? He went to public school in high school, but Education for Life schools up through 8th grade. Well, what's the difference in the schools? And he said, well, gosh, when I was at a Living Wisdom school, everybody did their best. And at public school, everybody's is trying to figure out what is the least they can do and get by. Wow, that is amazing, isn't it? And another student that who now designs software for pacemakers, told one of his former teachers at a wedding when he saw her many years later as a man in his mid-20s, he said, well, I learned a lot in high school and college that's helped me with my job, but everything I learned that helped me with life, I learned at Living Wisdom School. Wow. That's saying a lot. And much of that has to do with personal development. So we're going to talk a lot about that this morning. Self-expression and communication. Well, that's, of course, what we think of as English and writing, but also music, art, all of those things when we're doing them, when we're expressing ourselves. When we're studying them as from outside ourselves, like art appreciation or music appreciation, then they come under wholeness. Understanding people is what we think of as the social studies, right? But there's some things that are included in understanding people that, I meant cooperation. Understanding people is social studies. Cooperation, we all know what cooperation is. But we also put our foreign language under here, although I think some of us have, I've been confused about that at times and thinking it had to do with understanding other cultures, and of course they all like this, right? It's a holistic system. Life is holistic. Learning is holistic at its best. So everything interlocks with everything else. But foreign language, cooperation, how to work in a group, how to have a sense of community, how to respect every individual, and wholeness, as I mentioned, the study of religion, art, music, and literature. So what is it that we do in a Living Wisdom School to promote cooperation and personal development in children? We're going to, all the different teachers from the Portland School are going to share some things with you, and also Palo Alto School this morning in these areas, and hopefully we'll have time to get back to the other 4 areas which are more familiar to you. Any questions or thoughts so far? The curriculum we're talking about now is what leads to things that make our very best stories. I think a lot of you have heard my tower story about the child building a tower, but some of you may not, or you may have forgotten it. So let me tell you about the student we got who did not come to preschool and kindergarten here. He started first grade. And he was a little drama queen, we called him, because every single thing that happened was this dramatic response. You know, he didn't get to be first in line or behind the line leader, so second in line, and oh, it was just a horrible event. And at recess, nobody will play with me. You know what that usually means? Nobody will play what I want to play. And I don't want to give up what I want to play with everybody else. Constant emotional meltdowns. And I saw Karen and her co-teacher, I think it was Sonali at that time, constantly, patiently explaining to him, for example, you know, everybody doesn't have to play with you. You can go play with them and play what they want to. Or you could play that by yourself since you want to play it. You could be, your happiness doesn't depend on them. That may not be the words that they used. This constantly in the classroom, teaching him self-control when he didn't get what he wanted or things were. Pretty soon, his parents were saying to Karen, by Christmas time, how do you make him act like this? How do you make him behave? How can we do this at home? And the most beautiful thing happened in the spring, and it was actually a preschool teacher who witnessed this happening. And she saw him playing outside the preschool room with the preschoolers' blocks, building a block tower. First of all, she noticed it because he was playing by himself happily, and he was a very social being. And so just the fact that he had gotten this skill, he did not have that when he came, of being capable of doing something on his own and being content. So she just noticed it, particularly because of that. Well, a few minutes later, she saw this 3-year-old barreling toward his block tower. He had just said, "Look, I'm all done." And she turned to look, and here goes this 3-year-old. Before she could grab the 3-year-old, this 3-year-old crashed it to the ground. And Trina, who couldn't be here today, said she ran over waiting for, because we all knew this child. He was a very social child, so we all knew him, waiting for, you know, the temper tantrum or the screams or the wails. And she said, as quickly as she did, she used her training, her conscious discipline training, and said, "Did you like that?" When she when she pushed her tower down? Well, no, I didn't like that. And then she calls the 3-year-old. He didn't like that. Next time you need to ask before you. And meanwhile, she turns back to comfort him, and he seems fine. And he sits down, and he builds the tower back again. And it takes a long time to build it back again. And he stands up when he's finished, and he says, "I'm finished. It's ready for somebody to knock down." Inviting the 3-year-olds, expanding his reality. Is that incredible? Yeah. I think it's incredible. And as adults, you think about, I don't know about you, but in my life, I'm all the time building up these towers of things I think have to be a certain way, or the flower bed that has to be this way, and why did she come along and do that to it? And more serious attachments of how I think things ought to be, and they don't. They always get torn down, don't they? We always get a chance to test our even-mindedness. We can be sure of that, and to see not only his even-mindedness in accepting that it happened, but then to include them in this, to say, "Wow, I know you like knocking it down. You can do that now." It was incredible. So how do we get kids to that point? A few years back, the Dalai Lama came to Seattle, and they had a huge event called Seeds of Compassion. It was really a huge event. Many high-tech and other kinds of industry and companies in Seattle donated a lot of money to help this event happen. It had educators, psychologists, social workers come together for many panels and talks on how to teach compassion and to promote compassion. So it's just a wonderful thing to see a city come together for that. He spoke. It was really neat. One of the things they had on their website for Seeds of Compassion were lesson plans. And I thought, oh, goody. Let's see what those are. They had them for K through 2, 3 through 5, 9 through 12, something like that. Anyway, and I want to give appreciation and credit to the person who did this, because it took a lot of thought, and a lot of it is wonderful. And it's a great beginning, but it's only a beginning. So for grades K through 2, I brought 3 lessons today, and you can still find all this at Seeds of Compassion if you search that. What are the heroes of compassion? So the learning objectives are: describe the characteristics of one who shows compassion, understand what being a hero of compassion means, learn about the 14th Dalai Lama and recognize why he's recognized as a hero of compassion. So there are words to, you define hero and you understand hero. And then there are activities to learn about his life. And then there's a story to read and a lot of questions to answer about the story. Lesson 4, when is it a challenge to be compassionate? Well, this is better because it's getting us to our own personal experience. Recognize situations where it's difficult to be compassionate. Good. Understand that forgiveness is an important part of compassion. Then the activities are 3 different kind of role play scenes that could happen in the classroom, and how you could show compassion, how maybe not. So this is getting really good because it's talking about things the kids meet in their own everyday life and giving them a chance to think about different ways to react. But it's not actually calling on situations that actually happened in the classroom and then letting them reflect on them. Then lesson 5, how can you be a hero of compassion? Okay, great. Students will build on their understanding of compassionate behavior, identify ways they can become heroes of compassion, and this is a great one: recognize compassionate acts when they occur within their circle. So by the end, we're getting into actually demonstrating compassion and learning to recognize it. But even that requires a lot of skill, because what happens in the classroom when you recognize compassionate acts, if you haven't had experience doing it and you haven't had a teacher or a mentor or seen it being done, very easily you can notice that when you start rewarding compassionate acts, kids will start doing things while you're looking to get that reward. And that's not exactly, although that's better than not doing it, isn't it? But doing it to get a reward. But how can we make it more universal? Now, Erica was telling me a way that she makes these acts it makes it more universal when someone does something. Can you share that about the chart?
It's something that Barbara Raven in Palo Alto had developed, and it's
Would you
through all of
mind
our
standing?
classes, all of our classrooms. And there we have two charts. One is an I Practice Kindness chart, and one is an I Choose Happiness chart. And as we're going through the day, if a child notices that someone chose happiness when it was really challenging for them, or did some act of kindness, or if I notice it, we just, as we're going through, we'll just stop and say, oh, let's put a sticker on the chart. And we put a sticker on every single person's name, because if one of us can do it, then there's the possibility that we all can. And it also keeps it from becoming a competitive experience. I have more kindness stickers than you do. It defeats the purpose. So anyway, that's one way we do it.
Isn't that great? And I've also heard it said by teachers who do that, who give the sticker to everybody. She put it that if one can do it, we all can do it. And another way I've heard is that because every act of kindness makes our whole classroom happier. And that's another way to put it. And instead of it being competitive, it's like we're all building this wonderful classroom together. In the upper grades here, we do class points. And class points, they might be for something academic, like everybody made 100 today on a spelling test. Not that we have many spelling tests, but something like that. You might say, wow, look at this, and give a class point. But we try to make them more of like, gosh, today, say we've been having problems on the playground. There have been some arguments and bad sportsmanship, and we've talked about how to handle that. And then you come in from lunch and everybody's just gotten along fine. And then one of the rules is when the kids ask for a point, they don't get it. When somebody else says, Teacher Melissa, I saw so-and-so doing this kind thing for somebody else, then you might be able to do the class point if somebody else points it out, unless you have a sneaking suspicion they ask someone else to tell you. That doesn't really happen more till the older kids. So, but anyway, we give a class point. For example, I've noticed it I'm teaching communication to the 3rd through 5th grade, and we almost always start with a proofread. And they do it in their writing journal. And so one day I turned around from writing the proofread sentence on the board, and almost everybody in the class had their notebook out, had it open, and they were ready. You know that's astounding, right? I mean, some of you who maybe haven't stood in front of a classroom don't know that. You think, well, of course, but no, it usually takes a long time. Where is it? Which notebook? I can't find my, They were ready. So I wanted them to know how I had noticed this, that it was incredible. I wanted, one of the axioms of conscious discipline is what you pay attention to, you get more of. It's another way of saying we want to build on strengths. You recognize the strengths, you give feedback for strengths, and that spreads over into everything else the child does. What you pay attention to, you get more of. So if I said nothing except to the two who didn't have their notebooks, why don't you get your notebook out and be ready next time? That wouldn't be nearly as good as saying, wow, look at this. Everybody's ready. I can't believe it. I said this and I meant it. It's like a college classroom. And I turned around and gave them a class point. When they get 100 class points, they get to have a party of their choice, which means they get to decide. They've already had 100. And they're going to, when Sonali gets back from India, they're going to have a sleepover. That was their choice. So that's a way that everybody gets the reward, even though not everybody had the notebook out. So in that way, we promote cooperation as well as this being alert and being part of community and ready to go on together. And you're all going to get one of these. It's called Creating an Education for Life Classroom, and there are 2 parts of it. One is supporting there are 2 parts. One is personal development, and one is cooperation. And it's just a list of gobs and gobs of activities, and also references to things from my book and to Nitai Duranja's books of activities in there that you can do that promote and teach these qualities. So, under personal development, I believe it is, one of the goals is promoting children's highest aspirations, promoting their high-mindedness. Remember, there's a whole chapter in Calm and Compassionate Children on high-mindedness, that it's spiritual, but it's not religious or sectarian. It's that inspires us, that brings us to a calm and compassionate place. And so some of the activities that are under that are Wish Tunnel, which we're going to actually do this afternoon, which I think is something Helen told us about, but Lorna's going to lead us in it this afternoon. Personal affirmation, prayers, stories, music, and silence. So let's actually do one right now, led by Helen, that promotes this, not by telling children you ought to have high aspirations and only think about positive things. No. It promotes connectedness with all of life, and that way it bleeds over into the cooperation area too. And this is a prayer that she does with her children, so she's going to lead us all in doing it.
I bow to Mother Nature.
I bow to Mother Nature.
I lift to Father Sky.
I lift to Father Sky.
I open to the sun
I open to the sun
and the clouds going by.
and the clouds going by.
I welcome the rain
I welcome the rain
that flows to the sea.
that flows to the sea.
I honor the kindness in all of you and me.
I honor the kindness in all of you and me. And let's just take a moment of silence to feel that. Sit down. How many of you have seen Soraya, who is a student in Helen's class, doing that on YouTube? Have some of you seen that? Yeah. I can send you the link if you'd like it. So I know this really affects the kids because you see this video and you could see it does. I mean, she says, Mom, do you want to see, her mother told me, Mom, do you want to see my poses? And her mom said, poses? And there are some, she did do some yoga poses afterwards, but her mom said, what? And she started to do this prayer. Her mom said, wait, and ran and got the video camera and said, okay, now do it. And this 4-year-old goes through the whole thing in the living room with her baby brother screaming in the kitchen, but she stays right there focused. And you can see and feel that she's feeling the sentiments behind it. Which is just a matter of getting the child in touch with their body. And you know how when you're really excited, you can just be so out there that, and I know you've seen kids do this, they're knocking things down and running into things, and they need to just come back to their center is the only way I know how to say it. And Trina has this one where she has them just touch different parts of their body. And if at the 3-year-old level, that's challenging when you're excited. So she does this every time before they cross the street, for example. So she'll say, touch your hair. And she waits for everybody to touch their hair. And then touch your shoulders. Okay, touch your waist. And you'll see 1 or 2 still aren't doing it. And so you might even have to go over and assist them. I really appreciate that you guys just do it with me. What a great class. 1 point toward the party. Don't even have to ask you to participate. But see, that's a little more advanced because you have to really, you can't be thinking about your anxiety, your worry, what you're excited about. If you're trying to do, remember to inhale, touch your tongue. What happens is you bring your consciousness and your attention back to being grounded in yourself. And it's just a more advanced one than touch different body parts. So how about sharing what you've seen your child do at home that he got in school, that we don't know how he got it, but he brought this home to calm down. Yeah, you come up so that we can have you.
Okay. My son's been here, this is his 4th year here, so he's currently in Melissa's class in 2nd grade. And he's got an older brother at home, and like siblings do, they get into it with each other. And I noticed he picked up a certain, I would say, coping mechanism this year. And so we've been watching it. I mean, he'll get real upset and he'll go in his room, and then he'll come out and he'll be more calm. And he was doing this, really taking care of himself, being able to remove himself from the heat of the moment and calm himself down. So one day I kind of peeked on him. Now, what's he doing there? Is he reading books? Is he playing? And he was tracing in his hand. And over and over and over again, he traced and he traced. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm tracing a star. And I said, huh. And he said, and he was showing me what he was doing. I trace a star and I think of light, and it helps me calm down. And he also traces an S in his hand, which after hearing Melissa, I know where that came from. For him, he associated the word silence and stillness with it. So he says, I trace an S and I say to myself, silence, stillness. And he says, that doesn't work, then I do star, and I think of light, and he'll do it over and over, and sometimes, I mean, he's doing it over and over again, so he's doing it, his attention is going toward his hand, he's lighter when he comes out, and it calms him down. And in fact, the other day, we had an incident, he said, I said, well, why didn't you, where he got upset and it went a little too far. And I said, well, what about your techniques? He said, sometimes I'm too upset to do those. And he recognized that, it was past that level. So maybe before you get to that level, you can do that. But anyway, so I asked him where he got it, and he said, it's school. So.
And we love to hear that, don't we?
Just imagine if you had learned coping mechanisms like that when you were in school, and learned how to experience your feelings, not repress them and deny them, but then transform them, or transform yourself into letting them go. Isn't that totally amazing? I think.
So another way to calm down, of course, is breathing. And I asked Erica again if she would share what she'd shared in some homework that she had given in the online teacher training about breathing in her class.
We have, one of the things that we really work with the children on a lot is just breathing and doing deep diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. And I was on lunch duty out on the playground, and one of the children got hit in the face with a ball and went down. And he was crying. He was sort of borderline hyperventilating. And I watched one of the other boys, who I think is in 3rd grade this year. He saw what happened, and he went over. There was a big circle around this other child, and he got down on the ground with the hurt child, and he said, "Now you're fine. There's no blood. We just need to breathe." And, he said, "Now you need to look at me." So they made eye contact. He said, "Now just breathe in and breathe out." And they went back and forth like this for a little while, and I watched this child within a matter of a minute or two just completely stop crying, kind of brush himself off, and then they got up and went to play. And I just watched, from a few feet away. I'd never had to intervene. They worked through it all on